I want that sometimes plummeting space and then rising and then bowing out. And I want those shifting points of view, because that's about a movement, and maybe a more syncopated movement. I really wanted to paint this hill that seemed to just keep expanding and swelling. And I will say that one thing is, what I choose to paint is something I can't figure out. If I can figure it out somehow, if I can map out the whole, I'm not engaged. I've already done it. You know, it's already in my, I know it would be different than what would be in my head, but, so I have to have something that, it's a hunch and I go in. There's something that intrigues me and I go in. And with this swelling, I don't know, then it became about breath. My personal narrative, I don't know if I should go into this too much. My mother died a year ago, and it was about breathing and that sense of breath and the lost breaths. And so I thought, oh, that's what it's about, this big exhale. But when I did this, I didn't know that. I wasn't thinking, I'm not thinking about that. But there's a sense of maybe how the light, it's dusk, and the way it cascaded across the whole landscape and kind of illuminates it. And then the way this plunges down, and then this rising up. I think I paint a kind of embodied space, if there's such an embodied landscape. And you might say, well, of course you're out there. Of course it's embodied in a way, but it's through the physical. I mean, that the act of painting outside is literally physical, and it's also, well, yeah, you're confronted with the elements. But there's something about maybe the internal world and the external world meeting, or the fleshiness of how these hills feel to me, these mountains. I paint these visual forces. Like, I paint partly a geological force that I feel. I feel the way the land kind of pushes up. You know, those tectonic plates push up, and then another one comes down, and everything is, my world is movement. I am not, you know, I know there are painters who want to get back to the flatness and the stasis of the surface, of the rectangle. I am not one of them. It's just all about movement for me. And these paintings, I would say, move into a kind of rhythmic structure, which I'll maybe talk about later. But so where was I going? Yes, that they turn this incredible luminous gray-white. I don't know if it's the quartz or that it's the way the moonlight hits it, but it's this massive kind of Moby Dick white undulating whale.
Lynette,
Yes.
do you have this size canvas outside?
I do.
Wow.
I look like a lunatic.
A special easel? I mean,
It's a ladder.
I have a ladder and an easel. And I put rocks in the back of the easel, you know, the way you can do that. And I have rocks on the ladder so that it can hold it down, and then it's propped up. The painting's right like here, like this, and I'm looking at the landscape like that. Tony is right down here, alive, falling asleep on a rickety old chair, poor guy. And then I have my palette, and I have a light for the palette. So how do I do this? I also wear a miner's light, and I wear a big hat at night, because I know it's a myth, but I don't want to have to deal with it. The bats are flying around, and I don't want them in my hair. I just don't want to be distracted, so I wear the hat. But the process of painting is that, you know, your eyes adjust to a nocturnal light, and you start seeing things becoming clearer the longer you look at them, and your eyes adjust. So it's partly from memory of what I remember of the color, and then I'll put the light on the palette. I have all my color worked out, and then I start mixing, and I mix a lot at once, and then I go back in, then I turn the light off so my eyes adjust, and I'm painting the color that I'm seeing. Working from life, I feel as though I really am, I don't want to be a generalist, and I want to be grounded in what it is that I see. But it's also tied up with, you know, Louis Finkelstein wrote beautifully about perception. And that perception is tied to our psychological realities or dilemmas. And that it's all mixed up. So you got the emotive, you got the psychological, you've got the visual, and then I've got the pictorial and the history of paintings that I love. And you're all out there together negotiating each other. But I found that sometimes when I'm painting, and I will say that I start with flat. My paintings are flat to begin with. They're descriptive. I'm getting to know the motif, and then as I work a painting, it starts to it moves into a dimension. Does that make sense? And some of that dimensionality has to do with, I don't know, I don't have a name for it, but it's a kind of visceral, something has to happen that's visceral, so the paint has to start talking, and the relationships from one thing to another, from say how this moves right into this, and then there's the shadow of that, and then the counter movement here, and I start seeing the big relationships that are taking place. So the way that this scoops back here, and then this comes like this here. And then the logic of the painting begins. So another thing that I'm working on is the notion of the contemporary sublime. And that when I'm out there, I am, I'm minuscule, and nature is powerful. And I'm inside this vortex of these movements. But at the same time, I think, I'm not 19th century. I don't believe in a lot of the hierarchies that existed at that time. In terms of power structures or God. And so I'm more existential in a way in how I'm not 1940s existential, but there's a sense of unpredictability that is part of how I paint and how I live. But I'm interested in a kind of enveloping warmth. So, or blackness. I love the weight of black. I think of color as weight and as air, as density, as mass, and as air. And so I'm different kinds of density, like the weight of, say, that red versus the different weight of this against the blue, right? Or the weight of that. That has a kind of density, and this more airy. So I don't want to become formulaic either. I was trying to think of editing out and simplifying, and I like Susan Rothenberg's paintings, and that she can get to such a kind of visceral synthesis within a whole atmosphere, right? She reduces it. She doesn't wash her brushes, and she's not interested in any of that. And so up here, I was thinking, how can I simplify this sky, which then turns into this bird-like form, and I want that dipping in, and then just trying to get something that, I don't know, I was interested in these big masses moving in relation to each other, and these silhouetted trees, and then this tree kind of just took off into its own little world back here, and I kept thinking of going back in there, and I don't know, I go into something like this, and if somebody took a photograph of it, you'd see these, delicate red branches and a cluster of these trees, which goes right down to here. I mean, it's right down, it blocks the view. And then I go in, and I got this lyricism here, okay, and this air. I didn't want to lose this. This was from the beginning. I thought, breathe, Lynette, get some air in there. And then this thing happens, and I think it's like a rib cage, and it's like pushing, and it's pulsating. I mean, maybe sometimes it's a sound I feel or I hear, and it's got to have that oomph to it. Like, it was delicate at first, and then I think, it's got to come forward. And then it pushes, then I want to push that back. I want something that maybe is more fluid, but at the same time, and rhythmic, but at the same time, it's voluminous. I'm after a kind of poetic synthesis of what I see.